The hallway on the mezzanine level of the Kwan Grand Hotel was quiet at 8:23 p.m. Ji-hoon Kwan had stepped out of the ballroom alone. 8 minutes. That was all he gave himself before walking back in to finish the speech that would mark the first night his family's name stood fully in the light. He loosened his collar by one button, checked his phone, started walking. Then he stopped. A girl stood in the middle of the hallway, 6 years old. Dark curly hair pulled into 2 uneven puffs, yellow dress with small white buttons down the front. She was looking straight at him, not past him, not around him, directly at him, the way someone looks when they've spent a long time practicing what they're about to say. "Are you Ji-hoon Kwan?" No trembling, no hesitation. "I think you're my dad." Ji-hoon did not move. He looked down at her. She looked up at him, and the eyes that met his were black and sharp and completely, unmistakably his own. At the far end of the hallway, a woman in a deep blue dress stood completely still. Not approaching, not explaining, just watching, with the quiet steadiness of someone who had already made peace with whatever came next. 6 years. He had not said her name out loud in 6 years. What no one in that corridor understood yet was that the 6-year-old girl standing between them had planned this night for 3 weeks, while every adult around her was still deciding whether they were brave enough to act at all. Before we go any further, drop a comment right now and tell me, where are you watching from? And what time is it where you are? I want to know who's here for this one. And if this is your first time, welcome. Hit subscribe, because you do not want to miss how this story ends. Let's go back 6 years, before that hallway. Before that yellow dress. Before a girl named Mia Kwan Carter stood in front of a man she had never met and said the 5 words that no one in that building was prepared for. The corner office on the 31st floor of Kwan Tower faced north. On clear mornings, Ji-hoon could see as far as Evanston. On the morning 6 weeks before the grand opening, he stood with his coffee going cold in his hand and saw nothing at all. His name was on the building. His name was on the investment portfolio, the hotel project, the hospitality group that was about to have its first public debut. Kwan Hospitality Group. 47 employees, 3 restaurants. A hotel on the Magnificent Mile that had taken 4 years and $63 million to build. From the outside, everything looked like a scent. Inside, 2 stacks of documents sat on his desk. Permits and vendor contracts for the November 14th opening on the left. Notes from his attorney regarding a divorce consultation on the right. He had not signed either set. He had not canceled the attorney meeting either. He just stood at the window each morning until Min-jae knocked and said the first meeting was in 10 minutes. Ji-hoon had been married to Yeon Ji-han for 5 years. They occupied the same penthouse on Lakeshore Drive. They attended the same events, greeted the same people, signed the same documents. When they spoke directly, it was about schedules. Which boat car was being used that weekend? Catering preferences for the events Yeonji managed on behalf of the family. They had slept in separate rooms since their 2nd year. Neither had suggested changing that. No children. Doctors had offered explanations. Ji-hoon had listened to every one of them and believed none of them. You cannot grow something real in soil that was never prepared for it. He had known this for 5 years without once saying it out loud. That was the life he had. He had chosen it. 6 years earlier, Ji-hoon Kwan was 28 years old and standing near the bar at a charity gala on the 43rd floor of the Alder Building in Chicago's Gold Coast. He had been there for 19 minutes. He intended to leave at 20. Then he heard a laugh from across the room. Not a social laugh. Not the kind of sound people produce at events like this, pitched slightly higher than natural, aimed at whoever is most useful in the room. This was a real laugh, short and unguarded, the kind that does not wait for permission. He turned. A woman stood at the far end of the room in a circle of men who were each at least 15 years older than her. She wore a deep green dress, her hair natural and pulled back loosely. She was mid-argument, not mid-conversation, mid-argument, with someone who appeared to be a senior partner at a firm Ji-hoon vaguely recognized. She held a document in her hand and was pointing at a specific line on it. The men around her looked uncomfortable. She looked entirely at ease. Ji-hoon did not leave at 20 minutes. Her name was Simone Carter, 26 years old, a civil rights and labor attorney. She said this the way most people say their own name, plainly, without particular emphasis, as though it were simply a fact about the world. She had grown up in Atlanta. She had put herself through law school on scholarships and determination in roughly equal measure. She was in Chicago consulting on a discrimination case involving immigrant workers at a Korean-owned manufacturing company on the Southwest Side. The irony was not lost on either of them. After the event, they went to a small Korean restaurant in Lincoln Square. His suggestion, her immediate agreement. They talked until the staff began stacking chairs around them. Ji-hoon said things he did not typically say to people. Simone listened in a way he was not accustomed to, completely, without visibly preparing her next sentence while he was still finishing his. He did not want to leave. He did not leave until 1:47 in the morning. For 18 months, they existed in a space with no official name. Ji-hoon did not bring Simone fully into his world. Not because he was ashamed of her, but because the full picture of his world was not something he was ready to show anyone he cared about. The Kwon family had arrived in Chicago from Busan with almost nothing and had built something significant over 30 years through methods that did not appear in any legitimate filing. The hospitality business was real, but it had been seeded by a different kind of capital, and Ji-hoon was still deciding who he wanted to be on the other side of it. Simone knew he was more than a restaurateur. She did not know the precise shape of what more meant. Ji-hoon told himself he would explain. When the timing was right, when there was less to untangle, when he had found the words that made it sound like what it actually was. The timing was never right, but on Friday evenings, when Simone sat across from him at his kitchen table with case files spread open between them and neither of them, scritty the silent them, felt the need to fill the silence. What Ji-hoon understood for the first time what people meant when they said they had found something worth keeping. Madame Soon-hee-kwan summoned her son on a Tuesday afternoon in March. The meeting was in her private office, 2 doors down from Ji-hoon's own on the 31st floor. She was already standing when he arrived. She did not sit. She did not offer him a seat. She looked out the window for a long moment. Then she turned. "My son will never marry a black woman." She said it without preamble, without setup, the way one states a policy that has always existed and is simply being made explicit for the first time. "Never. Not while I am alive." Ji-hoon opened his mouth. She raised one hand. "Do you know how many years it took for people to invite this family to sit at the same table as them?" Her voice did not rise. It never rose. That was precisely what made it impossible to argue against. 30 years. 30 years I built this name. From nothing. And you will not destroy it. There were things Ji-hoon could have said. He had rehearsed several versions of this conversation in the elevator. On the way up, things about Simone. Her mind, her integrity, the quality of the quiet she brought into every room. Things that were true, he said none of them. He stood in the doorway of his mother's office and said nothing. Alec. 3 weeks later, on a Thursday evening, Simone Carter sat alone in the waiting room of a medical clinic on North Clark Street. The chairs around her were full. 2 couples sat with their fingers interlaced, looking at the same pamphlet. A woman across the room smiled softly at something on her phone. Everyone appeared to have arrived with someone. Simone had a coat in her lap and her phone face down on the chair beside her. She had already called once that day. It had gone to voicemail. The nurse called her name. She followed the sound down a hallway and onto an examination table. "Miss Carter," the doctor said, adjusting the ultrasound wand. She paused, leaned closer to the screen. "There's a heartbeat." She looked up. "Strong. You're approximately 8 weeks along. Congratulations." Simone stared at the monitor. One small shape, one fast, steady pulse that had nothing to do with her own. She did not cry in the room. She waited until the elevator doors had fully closed behind her. What Ji-hoon Kwon did not know, and would not know for 6 years, was that on the night he drove home from his mother's office in silence, Simone was already carrying something he had left behind without realizing it. And in 6 years, that something would walk up to him in a hotel hallway and say 5 words he had no answer for. For 3 days after the meeting with his mother, Ji-hoon did what people do when they are afraid and do not want to call it fear. He stayed busy. He attended 3 evening meetings that did not require his presence. He reviewed documents Min Jae had already signed off on. He answered emails at 2 a.m. and told himself it was productivity. He slept in increments of 90 minutes and told himself it was the pre-opening schedule. He thought about Simone constantly. He did not call her. He told himself he was protecting her, that the Kwan family's history was not clean, and the people his mother had negotiated with for 30 years were not people who accepted complications without consequence. He told himself that ending things quietly, without explanation, without pulling her further into something she did not fully understand, was the least harmful version of a harmful decision. He told himself this with enough consistency that it began to feel like something other than what it was. That is the nature of rationalizations. Given sufficient repetition, they develop the texture of principle. On the 6th day at 10:51 p.m., Ji-hoon drove to Simone's building on West Wrightwood Avenue. He did not fully decide to. He simply found himself there. He parked across the street and turned off the engine. Her light was on. 3rd floor, 2nd window from the left. He knew which one, because he had watched her pull the blinds closed from that exact window 18 months ago. On the first night, he had stayed past midnight. He sat in the car, 11:04. Her light was still on. 11:22. Still on, 11:39. He reached for his phone twice and set it back down both times. 11:47. The light in the second window went off. He sat for 12 more minutes in the dark. Then he started the engine and drove home through empty streets. He told himself, on the drive back, that appearing at her door would only have made things harder, that some conversations, once begun, cannot be stopped without causing more damage than silence would have. He told himself this. He drove past a diner they had eaten at 3 times and did not look at it. He did not sleep that night either. He called her the following afternoon. Not in the evening. In the afternoon, when it was more likely she was between meetings, when there was less likelihood she would have time to hold the line. She answered on the second ring. Ji-hoon! Her voice was warm, completely unsuspecting. The voice of someone who did not yet know what the next 30 seconds would contain. I was just thinking about. We're not right for each other. Silence. 4 seconds. What? This isn't working. I think we should end it. Another silence. Longer. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. Not broken, recalibrated. Careful in the way that intelligent people become careful when they sense that something is being withheld from them. Ji-hoon, something happened. I can hear it. Just talk to me. Whatever it is. There's nothing to talk about. Don't do this on the phone. Come over or let me. I have to go. I'm sorry. He ended the call. He sat at his desk without moving for 11 minutes afterward. Then Min Jae knocked and said the 2 o'clock was ready. Ji-hoon straightened his jacket, walked down the hallway, sat at the head of the conference table and spoke clearly about quarterly projections for 22 minutes. He was very good at continuing. 2 days later, Min Jae appeared in Ji-hoon's office doorway. He was carrying nothing. His expression was the particular one Ji-hoon had learned to recognize, the face Min Jae wore when something had already been decided at a level above both of them, and he was simply making the arrival of that decision official. It's done, Min Jae said. Ji-hoon looked up from his desk. Min Jae did not elaborate. He did not need to. Done covered a range of things, blocked numbers, deleted access points, filtered channels of communication across multiple devices. The specifics of what done meant had been determined by someone else, executed by someone else. Ji-hoon did not ask which specific things had been done, did not ask in which order, did not ask whether voicemails had been cleared before they arrived or after. He nodded once. Min Jae left. Ji-hoon turned back to his desk. He had not said yes. He had not issued any instruction. His hands were clean in every way that could be documented. He understood, with clarity he did not allow himself to dwell on, that this was precisely how the heaviest things get done. Simone Carter called 23 times over 19 days. She did not know the number had been blocked. To her, each call rang through and went to voicemail, the same as any unanswered phone. She left messages in the first week, measured, reasonable ones. Ji-hoon, I need to speak with you. Something has happened. Please call me back. By the second week, the messages were less measured. I know you ended things. I'm not calling to change that. I need 10 minutes. Please. By the third week, one sentence. Ji-hoon, I'm pregnant. It's yours. Please. The last message was left on a Tuesday evening at 7:14 p.m. Her voice was flat in the way that voices go flat when emotion has been replaced by the discipline of simply recording what is true. After the 23rd call, she stopped, not because she had accepted it, because she had understood something more useful than acceptance. She understood he was Mac, and she understood that he was not coming back, and that she did not have the luxury of waiting for someone who was not coming. There was a heartbeat on an ultrasound monitor that had nothing to do with Ji-hoon Kwan's decisions, and that heartbeat required her full attention now. She called Aisha from her kitchen floor at 11:32 p.m. 3 words. I need you, Aisha said. I'm booking the flight. She arrived the next afternoon, walked through the door, set her bag down, crossed the room, and held her sister for 40 seconds without speaking. Then Simone pulled back, wiped her face once, and said, I need boxes. They packed the apartment in 4 days. Simone did not cry while packing. She moved with the methodical efficiency of someone who has decided that feeling everything fully will have to wait until she has somewhere stable to feel it. Books first, then clothes, then kitchen. She left the framed photo of herself and Ji-hoon on the shelf until the final morning. Then she wrapped it carefully in a dishcloth and placed it at the bottom of a box she labeled storageries. Not trash. There was a difference. She could not fully explain it yet, but there was a difference. They drove out of Chicago on a gray Thursday morning. Simone watched the skyline in the passenger mirror until it disappeared. She did not look away until it was completely gone. Mia Kwan Carter was born on a Wednesday morning in Atlanta, 7 months later. 6 pounds, 14 ounces, a full head of dark hair. Eyes that were, from the very first hour, unmistakably not only Simone's. Simone held her daughter and did not speak for a long time, just looked. Then she said, quietly, Hello, I've been waiting to meet you. Aisha, standing beside the bed, cried enough for both of them. 4 months after Simone's moving truck left Chicago, Ji-hoon Kwan signed a marriage registration at his family attorney's office on a Tuesday afternoon. Yeon Ji-han signed her name in 3 precise strokes. Ji-hoon signed his. The attorney gathered the documents. The entire process required 11 minutes. Madame Kwan was waiting in the hallway. When they emerged, she looked at her son for a long moment. Then she smiled. Ji-hoon could not remember the last time he had seen his mother smile. He understood. Standing in that hallway, the precise exchange rate of what he had traded. Min-jae had completed the order within 6 hours of receiving it. Ji-hoon had not asked what, specifically, was done, had not asked whether Simone's calls had been filtered before they arrived or whether they had arrived and been removed. Had not asked how many times she had tried. He had not asked. There is a particular kind of complicity that carries no fingerprints. It requires only the absence of a question at the right moment. It leaves nothing on record. It costs nothing in the short term. The interest, however, accumulates. 6 years is long enough to build something. Simone had built a law practice, a mortgage, a morning routine involving oatmeal and NPR, and a 6-year-old who required 17 minutes of negotiation to agree on which shoes to wear. She had built a life in Atlanta that was genuinely hers. Not a consolation version of something else, not a waiting room. A life. Mia Kwan Carter was the center of it. She was 6 years old, and she operated with the internal logic of someone twice that age. She had a specific system for organizing her book collection. Not Not alphabetical, not by color, but by which books she believed needed to be near each other, based on reasons she could not fully articulate, but defended with complete conviction. She asked questions the way most children breathe, constantly, without awareness that she was doing it. She had recently, Thea informed her kindergarten teacher that Jupiter had 79 known moons, and followed this with the observation that it seemed lonely to have that many things orbiting you and still be mostly gas. Her teacher had sent Simone a note. Your daughter is remarkable. Also, she's right about Jupiter. In class, Mia drew pictures of her family. Simone, always centered. Aisha to the left, usually holding something. A phone, a bag, once a small satellite dish that Mia could not explain. And to the right, always, a figure that Mia had never given a face to in any version of the drawing. Tall, dark-haired, present in outline but unfinished. When her teacher asked who that was, Mia answered without looking up from her crayons. My dad. I don't know what he looks like yet. On a Thursday morning in October, Simone left a copy of a Chicago business magazine on the kitchen table. She had been reading it with her coffee. An article on commercial real estate development on the Magnificent Mile. She had set it face up when she went to answer a call, and by the time she came back, Mia was sitting at the table in her school uniform, cereal untouched, holding the magazine with both hands. Ji-hoon Kwan's photograph covered the upper third of the page. Simone stopped in the doorway. Mia studied the photograph the way she studied things she was determined to understand, slowly, without moving. Then she set the magazine flat on the table and placed one small finger on his face. He has my eyes, she said. Not a question. Simone crossed the room and picked the magazine up with a steadiness that cost her considerably more than it appeared to. Eat your cereal, baby. You'll be late. Mia watched her mother put the magazine in the recycling bin under the counter. She did not say anything else. But she did not forget either. 11 days later, Simone found a folded piece of paper in the front pocket of Mia's school jacket. She had not found it yet. Mia had found it herself at the school library on a Tuesday afternoon when the librarian had shown her class how to use the digital search catalog. Mia had waited until the other children moved on to a different terminal. Then she had typed 2 words into the search bar with careful, deliberate keystrokes. Ji-hoon Kwan. She had not told Simone this. The search returned several results. A business profile, 2 news articles, and an event listing from a Chicago hotel publication, the grand opening of the Kwan Grand Hotel on the Magnificent Mile. November 14th, a public event. Press and invited guests welcome. Mia read it 3 times. Then she clicked print. She folded the paper into quarters and put it in her jacket pocket. She rejoined her class at the nature table without explanation. That afternoon, on the car ride home, she talked at length about the life cycle of monarch butterflies, which they had also researched that day. She was 6 years old. She had already decided what to do. On a Saturday morning, 11 days before November 14th, Simone was brushing Mia's hair in the bathroom. Morning light through the frosted window, the radio on low in the kitchen. An ordinary Saturday with the particular slow quality that ordinary Saturdays have when nothing has gone wrong yet. Then Mia looked at her own hands. She turned them over, palms up, then palms down, her skin warm and brown in the morning light. She looked at them the way a person looks at something they have been carrying for a while and are only now deciding what to do with. She looked up at Simone's reflection in the mirror. Mommy. Did Daddy leave because I'm black? The brush stopped. Simone counted 11 seconds without meaning to. She knew she was counting because Mia was counting. She could see it, the small, precise rhythm of it behind her daughter's eyes. Mia always counted when the adults around her went quiet, as though she could measure the weight of an answer by how long it took to arrive. 11 seconds is a long time. It is long enough for a 6-year-old to understand something that no one has said. Simone set the brush down on the edge of the sink. She turned from the mirror and knelt on the tile floor, eye level with her daughter. Listen to me. Her voice was steady. It had to be. You did not do anything wrong. Nothing about you, not your skin, not your hair, not a single thing, caused him to leave. Do you hear me? Mia looked at her carefully. Then whose fault was it? Simone opened her mouth, closed it. For the first time in 6 years, the silence between them felt like a lie. Not a cruel one, not an intentional one, but a silence that had been accumulating interest, and Mia, at 6 years old, on an ordinary Saturday morning, had just presented the bill. It was complicated, Simone said finally. Mia nodded slowly. The nod of a child who has learned to accept incomplete answers from the adults she trusts most and has decided, privately, to find the rest after the answer herself. That evening, after Mia was asleep, Simone folded the laundry. She worked through the pile methodically. Shirts, pants, Mia's school uniform, Mia's yellow dress, Mia's jacket, the small navy one with the white buttons on the collar. She put her hand in the front pocket automatically, the way you do with children's clothes, checking for tissues or crayons or pieces of things that were never meant to go through the wash. Her fingers found paper. She unfolded it slowly. The event listing, the hotel name, the date, the address on North Michigan Avenue, and at the top of the page, in the header the printer had automatically included from the website, 3 words in small gray font, Quan Grand Hotel. Simone sat down on the edge of the bed. She read the page once, then again. Then she looked at the date, November 14th, and counted backward to the Saturday morning conversation. 11 days ago, Mia had found a magazine on the kitchen table. 11 days ago, Mia had placed one small finger on a photograph and said, "He has my eyes." 11 days ago, Mia had already known. Simone had thought she was protecting her daughter. Her daughter had been doing research. She called Aisha at 10:47 p.m. Mia figured it out. A pause. How much? Enough. She found the opening event. She printed the address. She's 6. I know. Aisha was quiet for 4 seconds. Then, "Are we going?" Simone looked at the folded piece of paper on the bed beside her. She thought about 11 seconds of silence in front of a bathroom mirror. About a child counting the weight of an answer that never came. "I'm not going to cause a scene," she said. "I'm not going there for him. I'm going because Mia asked me whose fault it was and I had nothing to say. And I am not willing to keep having nothing to say. I'm coming with you. I know you are. I'll book the flights." After she hung up, Simone sat in the quiet of the apartment for a long time. She could hear Mia breathing through the monitor on the nightstand, steady, unhurried, completely unaware that her mother had just found her printed piece of paper, or that finding it had settled something that 6 years of silence had left unresolved. What no one knew yet was that the night of November 13th, Simone finally told her daughter they were going to Chicago. Mia looked up from her book, calm as someone who had been waiting for this sentence for a long time. "I know," she said. Then she went back to reading. The Quan Grand Hotel opened at 6:30 p.m. on November 14th. By 7:00, the mezzanine ballroom held 287 guests. By 7:45, dinner service had replaced the canapés. By 8:00, the speeches had begun. The city alderman, then the head of the Chicago Korean American Chamber of Commerce, then a 4-minute video presentation of the Kwon Group's development timeline. By 8:15, Ji-hoon was 3 minutes into his own address when his phone vibrated twice in his breast pocket. He ignored it and kept speaking. Madam Soon-hee Kwon sat at the family table in the front row in a modern hanbok. Deep navy, structured lines, nothing soft, nothing decorative, a glass of still water in front of her. She had not touched the wine. She watched her son at the podium the way she had always watched him, assessing. Yeonji sat 2 seats to Madam Kwon's left. Her champagne was 2/3 gone. She was looking at something above Ji-hoon's head rather than at his face, the posture of someone waiting politely for a formal announcement of something she has already privately accepted. Min Jae stood near the main entrance with his hands at his sides. He had not eaten. On the mezzanine level, the corridor running parallel to the ballroom was accessible to all hotel guests. No event credentials required. A long glass panel separated the corridor from the room. Guests outside could see in at an angle. Simone, Aisha, and Mia arrived at 7:58 p.m. Mia was wearing the yellow dress. She had brushed her own hair and had announced in the car with finality that she was ready. Aisha had looked at Simone in the rearview mirror. Simone had said nothing back, which was its own kind of answer. At the top of the mezzanine stairs, Mia walked directly to the glass panel. She found Ji-hoon at the podium without hesitation, as though she had already known exactly where he would be standing. She pressed her fingertips lightly against the glass, and looked at him. The same way she had looked at the magazine photograph on the kitchen table. Slowly, completely, without any indication that she intended to stop until she had understood everything she needed to understand. She stood like that for 40 seconds. Then she turned and looked at Simone. Simone met her daughter's eyes and did not look away. She did not say yes. She did not say no. She simply looked at Mia with the fullness of someone who has made a decision and is prepared to live with everything that follows from it. Mia turned back to the glass. "He's going to come us out soon," she said quietly. Speakers always take a break. She was 6 years old and she was right. At 8:21 p.m., Ji-hoon stepped away from the podium and said he would return in 8 minutes. He came through the side door into the corridor, alone. No aid, no security following at distance. Just a man in a $9,400 suit who needed a few minutes of quiet before the closing portion of the evening. He loosened his collar by one button. He checked his phone. He started walking. Mia let go of Aisha's hand. She walked forward without running, without hesitating. The deliberateness of someone who has researched something many times and has decided to trust the preparation. Her yellow dress moved around her knees. Her footsteps were very small against the marble floor. She stopped directly in his path. He looked up. "Are you Ji-hoon Kwon?" He stopped. "Yes." "I think you're my dad." She said it plainly, the same way she had told her teacher about Jupiter's 79 moons, simply releasing something she already knew to be true. "My name is Mia Kwon Carter. Mom said I could keep both names." Ji-hoon looked down at her. He looked for a long time. Her eyes were black and sharp, that particular angle at the outer corners. He had looked at that angle in the mirror every morning for 34 years. Her jaw was his. Her brow line was his. The way she held her chin, very slightly elevated, as though she had decided not to look up at anything if she could arrange to look straight across at it instead. That was his, but her expression. The specific quality of waiting in it, patient, certain, without pressure. That was not his. He knew exactly whose it was. His phone hit the floor. He did not reach for it. He looked at his daughter for 4 full seconds. Then Ji-hoon Kwon went down on one knee on the marble floor, suit and all. He brought himself to her eye level and held her gaze. "What did you say your name was, Mia Kwon Carter?" "How old are you?" 6. My birthday is in March. I like space. I know all the planets in order, including the dwarf ones. Something in Ji-hoon's chest shifted in a way he could not immediately name. "Which is your favorite?" He was not sure why he asked. It was not a question he had prepared. He had not prepared any questions. Mia considered this with full seriousness. Saturn, because it has rings and everyone talks about Jupiter like it's the most interesting one, but Saturn is right there the whole time. A pause. "Also, it's prettier." Ji-hoon said nothing for a moment. Then he looked up, past Mia, toward the far end of the corridor. Simone stood at the edge of the hallway and had not moved since Mia let go of her hand. She was not approaching, not explaining. She held completely still with the particular steadiness of someone who has imagined this moment so many times. In the years after that, they have long since moved through every version of it and arrived at something quieter on the other side. She was watching her daughter, not him. The ballroom door opened. Madame Soon-hee Kwan stepped into the corridor. She moved with her customary pace, measured, authoritative. Min-jae had reached her through the side channel, relayed in 2 sentences that Ji-hoon had not returned to the stage. She came herself. That was her manner. She saw Ji-hoon on one knee on the floor. She saw the child. She stopped. 12 feet between them. Not enough. Madame Kwan looked at the girl's face with the involuntary focus of someone who has recognized something before their mind has fully processed what it is. The jaw, the brow, the angle at the outer corners of the eyes. She had looked at those same features across a breakfast table for 28 years. Her hand at her side closed slowly around nothing. 2 steps behind her, Yanji had followed through the same door. She stood still, took in the corridor in one sweep. Ji-hoon on the floor, the child. Simone at the far end. The particular silence that had settled over all of it. She reached to the tray of a passing waiter, set her champagne glass down, completely still, completely composed, the most collected person in the hallway. Ji-hoon stood up. He turned to face his mother. He did not raise his voice. The corridor was quiet enough that he did not need to. You told me your son would never marry a black woman. He held her gaze without effort, without theater, not while you were alive. Madame Kwan said nothing. This is your granddaughter. No gesture. No pause for effect. She is 6 years old. She flew here from Atlanta and walked up to me in a hotel corridor because no one else was doing anything. He stopped. The silence that followed was not short. It carried the weight of one Tuesday afternoon meeting. A 23 calls a 1 dratat 4 months. 3 calls that arrived at a block number. 4 months, 5 years of a marriage built on convenience. And a child who had printed an event listing from a school library and folded it into quarters and kept it in her jacket pocket for 11 days without telling anyone. Madame Kwan looked at her son. Then she looked at Mia. Mia looked back at her grandmother with the open, unhurried attention of a child who has not yet learned to be afraid of difficult people, just curious about them. Who are you? Mia asked. Straightforward, no malice, simply a question that needed answering. Madame Kwan did not answer immediately. In 62 years, there had always been an answer ready. She had built her life on the availability of answers. Clear positions, clear hierarchies, clear lines around what was acceptable and what was not. She looked at this child, and the answer did not come. They found a small room off the corridor, a staff meeting room, oval table, 6 chairs, fluorescent light that buzzed faintly at one end. Someone brought water. No one asked who authorized this. Mia fell asleep in the chair nearest the door within 20 minutes. She had simply sat down, placed her hands in her lap, and closed her eyes with the complete absence of ceremony that belongs exclusively to children. Her yellow dress had a small smudge of something on the hem. Chocolate from the dessert station in the hotel lobby, Aisha confirmed quietly. She had stopped to ask for it on the way up. Even tonight, she had stopped for chocolate. Aisha took the chair beside her, which left Ji-hoon and Simone on opposite sides of the oval table, with Mia sleeping between them and nothing left to perform for. I didn't know you called, Ji-hoon said. No, you didn't know. Simone's voice was measured, not cold, measured, the voice she used in rooms where precision mattered. But you chose not to ask. There's a difference between those two things. Ji-hoon did not argue. He looked at Mia. She flew here herself, in her mind. She printed the address 11 days ago and kept it in her jacket pocket. Simone paused. She's been planning longer than either of us. Ji-hoon was quiet for a moment. She said Saturn is prettier than Jupiter. Something shifted in Simone's expression. Not a smile. Not yet. Not tonight. But the specific softening that happens when a person hears their child described accurately by someone who had no right to know them and somehow does. She tells everyone that, Simone said. She's not wrong. Yeonji found Ji-hoon in the corridor at 10:14 p.m. She did not come with her attorney. She came alone, which told him everything about what kind of conversation this was going to be. She stood in front of him with her hands at her sides. Her champagne was long gone and she had not replaced it. She looked, if anything, less distressed than anyone had been that evening, as though the night had settled something for her that had been imprecise for a long time. I never loved you, she said. Not as an accusation, as a statement of fact being offered honestly for the first time. I thought I could build something reasonable from a reasonable arrangement. I don't think that anymore. Ji-hoon looked at his wife. I know, he said. I'm sorry. I'm sorry too. She said it without bitterness, without performance. 2 people who had wasted 5 years being polite to each other at the expense of being honest with themselves. I'll call. My attorney in the morning. She turned and walked back toward the elevator. She did not look back. It was, Ji-hoon thought, the most honest conversation they had ever had. The divorce was finalized on December 31st. Total assets divided, $14,300,000. No contest, no mediation required beyond the first session. Kwon Group lost 2 strategic partners from the Han family network within the following 6 weeks. Ji-hoon did not attempt to negotiate their return. On January 7th, Min Jae-oh submitted his resignation in a single typed paragraph. Before clearing his office, he sent one email. Not to Ji-hoon, to Simone Carter, at the address listed on the Carter and Holloway Law website. Miss Carter, 6 years ago I blocked your calls and messages on instructions from Madame Kwon. It was my hands that did it. I have thought about this for 6 years. I am sorry. I do not expect a response. Simone read the email 3 times over 2 days. She did not respond, but she did not delete it either. Madame Soon-hee Kwon did not apologize. She went silent for 6 weeks. No calls, no family dinners, no instructions forwarded through intermediaries. For a woman who had operated through constant communication for 30 years, the silence was its own statement. Ji-hoon understood it without translation. The first move would have to come from her. And it would come in its own time, or not at all. The co-parenting arrangement was drawn up by 2 separate attorneys and signed on February 3rd. Ji-hoon had Mia every other weekend, 2 weeks in summer, holidays alternating by calendar year. He was required to give 48 hours notice for any change to the schedule. There was a clause. Simone's attorney had drafted it, and Ji-hoon had signed it without amendment. That read simply, "The child is not a negotiating instrument for either party." Ji-hoon had read that line 4 times before signing. He understood that it was not directed only at him. It was a principle, a line in the ground that meant, whatever happened between the adults, Mia stood outside it. He signed. Simone did not stay in Chicago. She went back to Atlanta with Mia and Aisha on February 5th. Ji-hoon stood on the sidewalk outside the hotel and watched the car until it turned the corner. He stood there for a while after that. He was not waiting for it to come back. He was just standing still, which was something he had not done without a purpose in a very long time. 6 months later, 3 things happened in the same week. On a Tuesday, Mia's ballet class had their first studio rehearsal. She had been taking lessons for 3 months. Ji-hoon drove from Chicago to Atlanta for the weekends specifically to attend. He sat in the 3rd row of folding chairs in a mirrored room that smelled of rosin and warm floors. Mia was the smallest in her group. She was also, objectively, the most serious. When she caught Ji-hoon's eye across the room, she gave him the smallest nod, professional, focused, and returned her attention to the instructor. He did not laugh until he was back in the corridor. On a Wednesday, Madame Kwon called Ji-hoon at 7:22 p.m. Not through her assistant, directly. Her voice was slower than usual, stripped of the particular authority she usually carried the way other people carry. "I'll make Mio keys," Ji-hoon said. He would ask. That evening, he asked Mia, who was drawing at the kitchen table. She thought about it with her full face, the way she thought about everything, for 10 seconds. Then she said, "Okay, but if she's not nice, we leave early." Ji-hoon waited until Mia had gone back to her drawing before he allowed himself to react. On a Thursday, Simone Carter was named senior partner at Carter and Holloway Civil Rights Law, effective March 1st. Aisha bought a cake. Mia blew out the candles on her mother's behalf because, she explained with complete authority, Mom deserves someone to do it for her for once. Simone did not argue with this logic. On a Tuesday afternoon in March, Ji-hoon arrived at Mia's school at 3:51 p.m. He was 14 minutes late. The meeting had run over. He had known at 3:30 that he would not make it by 3:37. He had left anyway, mid-sentence, which he had never done before. But traffic on the interstate had not cooperated. Mia was standing in front of the school gate with her backpack on and her arms at her sides. She saw him coming from half a block away. She did not wave. He crossed the last stretch of sidewalk and stopped in front of her. He went down on one knee, on the sidewalk, in his work clothes, in front of the school gate and the other parents collecting their children around them. "I'm sorry," he said. "The meeting ran late. I left as soon as I could, but I should have left earlier." Mia looked at him. She had his eyes. She had his precision. She assessed him with the full weight of both, 11 seconds. Then she picked up his hand. She did not say it was fine. She did not say she forgave him. She simply placed her small hand in his and started walking toward the car, pulling him along by default, as though the question of whether he was worth continuing with had been considered and answered, and she was ready to move on to the next thing. Ji-hoon stood up and walked beside her. The afternoon light was going sideways and gold over the school fence. Mia was telling him something about a boy in her class who had gotten Jupiter and Saturn confused in a science presentation, which she clearly considered a serious error that merited full analysis. Ji-hoon listened. He held her hand, and he listened completely, without preparing his next sentence, without looking at anything other than the top of her head and the sidewalk in front of them. It was, he understood, the exact quality of attention he had felt for the first time in a Chicago restaurant at 1:47 in the morning, 6 years and a lifetime ago. The kind that does not wait for permission. Mia had it too. Of course she did. Of course she did. Ji-hoon Kwan had arrived in that hotel corridor on November 14th with everything he had spent 6 years building. The name, the opening, the clean version of a complicated history. He left it with something he had not known was missing. Simone Carter had spent 6 years building something too. A practice, a home. A child who printed event listings from library computers and kept them in jacket pockets and flew across state lines with a yellow dress and a question she had decided not to wait any longer to ask. Neither of them had chosen the easy version of any of this, but Mia, at 6 years old, armed with a folded piece of paper and the particular certainty of a child who has not yet learned to accept incomplete answers, had decided that someone had to go first. So she did. If there's something this story leaves you with, let it be this. The adults in Mia's life spent 6 years deciding whether they were ready, whether the timing was right, whether the cost was too high. Mia spent 11 days planning. Then she put on her yellow dress and walked forward. So here's what I want to ask you, and I want you to think about this honestly before you answer. If you were Ji-hoon, when your mother said those words, "My son will never marry a black woman," would you have been able to say the thing you needed to say? Or would you have stood in that doorway like he did, choosing silence, because silence has no consequences you can see yet? And if you were Simone, when your 6-year-old asked you, "Did Daddy leave because I'm black?" and you had 11 seconds of silence, what would your answer have been? Drop it in the comments. Where you're watching from, what time it is, and which one of those questions is harder for you to answer, because I think you already know. If this story moved you, like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today, not tomorrow. Today, and the next story, I'll see you there.